She captivated millions with her warmth and a smile that felt like sunshine on screen. From her earliest days as a child actress to her unforgettable role as Juliet Barnes on Nashville, Hayden Panettiere built a career that defined a generation of television. But behind the spotlight was a story far more complicated than any script she ever performed. When she died on August 16, 2026, at just 36 years old, the world was left shaken, grieving, and full of questions. And now, in a statement that has left no one unmoved, her estranged mother Leslie Vogel has finally broken her silence. This is the story of Hayden Panettiere. When Leslie Vogel spoke publicly for the first time following the death of her daughter, the words she chose carried the weight of decades. Vogel told NBC News that she thought Hayden was an amazingly talented person in so many departments, and that young people who grow up in the entertainment industry face a genuine struggle, with it being not unusual for them to sadly find the wrong path. She added that she believed Hayden had sadly lost her way and expressed deep regret that things had turned out differently. Those words, delivered through tears, reflected something far deeper than a mother processing grief in real time. Leslie Vogel, now 70, had been estranged from Hayden for years before her daughter's death. Vogel, a former soap opera actress, had been Panettiere's manager from the very beginning of her career, making business and financial decisions for her daughter throughout her childhood. That professional relationship stretched across the entirety of Hayden's childhood and into her teen years, defining not just a career trajectory, but the very nature of their bond as mother and daughter. She signed Hayden with the modeling agency Wilhelmina Models at 8 months old, setting in motion a career machine that would run without pause for nearly 2 decades. By 4, Hayden was performing on the ABC soap opera One Life to Live. By 6, she had joined Guiding Light. By 11, she had reportedly appeared in more than 50 commercials and had become the primary breadwinner for her family. These were extraordinary achievements for a child who had not yet entered middle school, but they came at a price that would not fully surface until many years later. Hayden opened up about what growing up that way had done to her, saying she was groomed and felt like a little soldier, raised simply to follow instructions, memorize the dialogue, hit her marks, and never say no. The breaking point in their relationship came while Hayden was starring in the NBC series Heroes. During an appearance on the Jay Shetty podcast to promote her book, Panettiere explained how she fired Vogel due to their momager dynamic, recalling that she told Vogel she did not want them to work together anymore and that she just wanted her to be her mom. Vogel's response was 2 words that haunted Hayden for the rest of her life: "You owe me." Then, without further conversation, she walked out of the trailer, and their relationship was never the same again. In her memoir, Panettiere called her mother a perfectionist and alleged that Vogel superglued a fallen tooth back into Panettiere's mouth so she would not lose a job, and also claimed her mother pushed her to dress in more girly outfits rather than her preferred tomboy style. These specific and deeply personal details made the memoir, titled This Is Me, A Reckoning, such a charged and contested document. Published in May 2026, just 3 months before Hayden's death, it forced a very public reckoning between a mother and daughter who were no longer speaking. Vogel told Page 6 that after 20 years of trauma, she took the advice of professionals and chose a no-contact route, explaining that no parent hopes to watch a child choose self-destructive paths, and that you cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. Vogel, who had also lost her son Jansen in 2023 to heart complications, said through tears to NBC that she feels Hayden is with her brother and they are at peace. That quiet statement revealed the full depth of what this mother had endured. 2 children gone too soon, a family broken apart by pain, fame, and unresolved wounds that never healed. Now, as the world mourned Hayden Panettiere, Leslie Vogel's first public words were not just an expression of loss. They were the long-delayed conclusion of a story building since the moment an 8-month-old girl was handed to an industry that never let her go. But the mother's silence was only one piece of this deeply complicated picture, and to understand what Leslie Vogel was really responding to, you have to understand the extraordinary career Hayden built and the cost it quietly extracted from her. Stay glued till the very end. The career that made her a household name, Hayden Panettiere's rise through Hollywood, was not gradual. It was relentless. By the time most children were navigating friendships and school plays, she had already appeared in more than 50 commercials and earned a Grammy nomination for Best Spoken Word Album for Children for her voice work on A Bug's Life in 1998, making her one of the youngest Grammy nominees in that category at the time. She has starred as Claire Bennett on the NBC superhero series Heroes from 2006 to 2010, as Kirby Reed in the Scream franchise from 2011 to 2023, and as Juliet Barnes in the ABC and CMT musical drama series Nashville from 2012 to 2018. Each of those roles arrived at a different stage of her life and marked a different chapter in her public story. Heroes was where Hayden first became a true phenomenon. Her character, Claire Bennett, a cheerleader with regenerative healing powers, drove much of the first season's narrative and turned Hayden into one of the most recognizable young actresses in the country almost overnight. The show ran for 4 seasons and gave her a global platform she had never had before, even after decades already spent working. Audiences responded to her warmth and emotional honesty in ways that transcended the supernatural premise entirely. But it was Nashville that became the defining work of her adult career. The role of Juliet Barnes earned her 2 nominations for the Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actress in a series, miniseries, or television film. She played a volatile and deeply human country music star navigating fame, complicated relationships, and personal collapse across 6 seasons. The irony of that role, in retrospect, is difficult to ignore. Juliet Barnes was a woman who had everything the world valued and still could not find peace within any of it. Hayden Panettiere understood that character from the inside out. As Panettiere told Jay Shetty on a May 2026 episode of his podcast, those early achievements came at the cost of a normal childhood, and by the time she was 11, she had already acted alongside Denzel Washington in Remember the Titans, which led her teachers and classmates to treat her entirely differently. That separateness, that sense of being neither fully a child nor fully an adult, followed her throughout her professional life and shaped the private struggles she would later make public with extraordinary honesty. Nashville ended its run in 2018 after 6 seasons. That conclusion marked the end of an era for Hayden and the beginning of what would become the darkest stretch of her life. When the show ended, the actress fell deeper into opioids and alcohol, describing wanting to do everything she was not supposed to do and explaining that acting had been her whole life. But she felt so bad about herself that she lost all trust in herself. The loss of the show also coincided with a custody arrangement that separated her from her young daughter, compounding a period of grief she would spend years slowly working through. In her memoir and during her press tour in 2026, Hayden described a woman who had finally turned a corner. During her book tour, she told Shetty she had shaken off the darkness and negativity, that one door had closed and another had opened, and that she could feel all the possibilities ahead and believed she had a lot more life to live. Those words, spoken just weeks before her death on August 16th, 2026, captured the particular and cruel irony of what came next. The career that made her famous also shaped the conditions of everything she struggled with, and that struggle never fully released her. Stay tuned. No part of Hayden Panettiere's later life attracted more scrutiny than her on-again, off-again relationship with Brian Hickerson, and no part of Leslie Vogel's public statement was more pointed than what she said about him. Vogel told NBC News that the person in Hayden's life they had been trying to get rid of for quite some time was with her at her death, and that person was Brian Hickerson. Those words were measured and direct in a way that left absolutely no room for ambiguity. Panettiere initially connected with Hickerson, an aspiring actor and real estate agent, through her brother in 2018, fresh off the official end of her long relationship with heavyweight boxing champion Vladimir Klitschko. That timing matters. She had just ended a lengthy engagement, relinquished day-to-day custody of her daughter Kaya to Klitschko in Ukraine, and watched her defining television role come to an end. By any measure, she was in a vulnerable and untethered moment when Hickerson entered her life. What followed was a relationship that rapidly became a matter of public record and serious legal consequence. Hickerson was arrested in May 2019 on an allegation of injuring a spouse or girlfriend, according to Los Angeles County court records, and pleaded no contest in April 2021, receiving a sentence of 45 days in jail along with 4 years of formal probation. In 2021, Hayden publicly addressed the abuse, writing on Instagram that she was coming forward so her story could empower others in abusive relationships to seek the help they deserved. In her memoir, Panettiere wrote that one night Hickerson beat her so badly that she did not leave the house for weeks. She hesitated to report the abuse to police because she did not want the public to find out. That hesitation, rooted in the kind of visibility that comes with being a recognizable face, was one of the most searing details in the book. She was not just managing the trauma of abuse. She was managing it while the entire country watched her every move. During a May 2026 episode of Jay Shetty's On Purpose podcast, Hayden described how they could be dancing and joking together, and then a switch would flip, and suddenly everything changed, describing the cycle of warmth and violence as something that defined and trapped the entire relationship. Her account of that cycle was a painfully honest portrait of how abuse operates and why it so rarely ends in a single clean decision. Reports confirmed that Panettiere traveled with Hickerson from Los Angeles to South Carolina the day before her death. That detail, more than almost anything else that emerged in the days after her passing, crystallized everything her family had feared. She had not fully broken free. Hickerson and his brother Zach were both present at the Judson Mill Loft apartment in Greenville, South Carolina, when she was found unresponsive by a friend on the afternoon of August 16, 2026. The police report noted that Hickerson did not become visibly emotional until she was declared dead at the scene, and he showed officers a bag of medication Hayden was taking at the time of her death. The cause of death remained under investigation at the time of this publication, with authorities confirming she was in cardiac arrest when first responders arrived and that no foul play was suspected. Leslie Vogel's position was unequivocal. In her view, Brian Hickerson's continued presence in Hayden's life had been a source of ongoing danger, and his presence at the moment of her daughter's death was something she needed the world to understand. Behind this relationship, and behind her mother's pain, lay an even older wound gathering quietly for decades. Stay glued till the very end. To understand the full weight of Leslie Vogel's statement in August 2026, it is necessary to understand what both she and Hayden had already endured in the years leading up to that moment. Jansen Rain Panettiere was born on September 25, 1994, in Palisades, New York, and died on February 19, 2023, in Nyack, New York, at the age of 28 from cardiomegaly, an enlarged heart coupled with aortic valve complications. He was Hayden's only sibling, an actor who had appeared in multiple film and television projects, and the person she described as the other half of her soul. In a People magazine interview, Hayden said that Jansen had been her only sibling, that it had been her job to protect him, and that when she lost him, she felt like she lost half of her soul. His death arrived at a moment when Hayden had just started rebuilding her life in earnest. She was sober, she was working, and she was preparing for what felt like a genuine new chapter. Then Jansen was gone, and her body responded to that grief in ways she could not control. She gained approximately 40 pounds in the weeks following his death, developed agoraphobia, and described herself as unable to leave her home. The psychological weight of losing him reshaped her recovery timeline entirely and sent her back into a period of profound darkness. She found her way out slowly, through long walks and the discipline of returning to routines that had always given her structure. But the pain never fully lifted. She marked every anniversary of his death publicly, every birthday he should have lived to see, with words that made clear this was a loss she carried every single day. Vogel, speaking through tears at NBC, said she feels Hayden is with her brother and they are at peace. That belief, expressed quietly and with visible grief, was a most tender moment in an otherwise pointed statement. It was a voice of a mother who had outlived both of her children, reaching for some version of comfort in the only direction still available. The memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning, published in May 2026, forced Hayden and Leslie Vogel into a very public confrontation with their shared history. Hayden described the psychological and professional pressure of her childhood in detail that shocked many readers, portrayed herself as feeling groomed rather than guided, managed rather than loved. When the book was released, Vogel pushed back firmly, describing her own experience as 20 years of trauma and explaining that she had chosen no contact on the advice of mental health professionals. Hayden had told interviewers repeatedly that she had not given up on reconciliation with her mother. She said she had left the door open and felt her mother had chosen to close it. Vogel described the no-contact decision as something done in the interest of her own survival. Two versions of the same relationship, told from opposite ends of the same wound, with no resolution reached before time ran out. Hayden's father, Skip Panettiere, announced her death in a statement describing her as an incredible light and a force of nature who brought immeasurable love and joy to all who knew her and to the millions who watched her on screen. His words, warm and devastated, stood in contrast to a more complicated statement from Leslie Vogel, who spoke a loss alongside an unmistakable desire to assign meaning and accountability to what happened. Leslie Vogel did not end her statement without tenderness. She said Hayden had many incredible attributes. She said she wished things had been different. She said she wished Hayden had stayed true to herself. And through tears, she said she believed Hayden and Jansen were now together and at peace. Those words, in their own quiet way, were the closest thing to a reconciliation that time would allow. Not a conversation, not a reunion, not the phone call that never came. Just a mother, speaking to reporters in deep grief, trying to say what she could no longer say directly to her daughter. The story of Hayden Panettiere is not simply the story of a child star who lost her way, though that version will be told often. It is the story of a woman who was placed inside an industry before she had any language for what was being asked of her, who carried that weight through decades of extraordinary achievement, and who spent her final years trying honestly and publicly to put it all into words. The memoir was that attempt. The podcast appearances were that attempt. Even the complicated and deeply painful decision to remain close to someone who had hurt her was, in its own tragic way, an attempt to find something warm and familiar in a life that had never quite felt entirely her own. What remains is the work, the performances that millions still carry with them, the voice that brought Juliet Barnes to life across 6 unforgettable seasons, the woman who sat across from Jay Shetty just weeks before her death and said she could feel all the possibilities opening up around her. In the end, that is the Hayden Panettiere the world should hold on to. Not the tragedy, but the immense talent and the extraordinary, complicated, irreplaceable human being who lived behind it all. Thanks for watching. If this video moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear the story. Drop in the comments, what do you think Hayden Panettiere's true legacy should be remembered as?